And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Jeremie Kubicek. He is the CEO of Giant. He is the author of 4 books, the most recent just coming out as we speak, which is the 100X Leader. And he's been around this sort of training leadership event space for 2 decades now. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from Jeremie today. So thanks for coming on board and thanks for joining us today, Jeremie.
Peter, so good to be with you. Fired up to talk with you.
Yeah, so you've been at this game for a long time. So why don't we start with maybe a little history lesson in terms of what you've seen evolving from a leadership business or the leadership business basically that was primarily event based to where it's moved to today. So you want to give us a little walk down
Yeah,
memory lane, if you will?
absolutely. Yeah. So in around 2002 or so, I started getting into really heavily into the coaching area and growth consulting and all of those combinations. And then in 2007, we bought John Maxwell's assets. So, most people are aware of who John Maxwell is, but thought leader. We bought the training divisions. We bought his events business. We bought really most of the assets there. It was under a brand called Enjoy, and I started decoupling all of these old brands and all of these old events, and then putting emphasis on a couple of specific events. So we grew the Catalyst conferences. I built the Chick-fil-A LeaderCast and the LeaderCast brand.
Yep.
And then we started partnering with Henry Cloud and started doing some work with Pat Lencioni, started playing with Mark Sanborn. We started to do some little projects with Jim Collins. And then Andy Stanley, Craig Rochelle, these different thought leaders in different spaces and different sectors. And so it was an interesting time to say the least. Well, that was 2007. And then I don't know if you remember that. I think there was a recession that hit in 2008. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
And,
briefly. I chose not to participate in it, but yeah, I
okay.
read a lot about it.
Yes, yeah. So that recession, you buy all this stuff, these companies, and you take them all apart, and then enters in this massive recession. And what crazy enough, it actually benefited us because we had fresh cash infusion into the acquisition game. Well, everyone else didn't. So all of these events went out of business, and all of these different training groups kind of went down, and we picked up market share.
But let me ask you on that though. So I think I think looking back, the recession was clearly a factor, right, in terms of
Right.
why event-based businesses got hurt. But I think it's simultaneously you have this other thing called technology and the internet,
Yeah.
and this is sort of
True.
the early Twitter or pre-Twitter, early Facebook world. So I think that those two factors together were sort of the perfect or imperfect storm for you because the only way to get learning delivered to you at a distance prior to that was plug in a video cassette or do something satellite like Maxwell had done. But this instant real time, anytime on my device mobile world was just really being born at that time, if you will.
Absolutely. And it was also the end of the publishing era.
Yep.
So it was the first movers, and we weren't. I don't know if we were the first movers from technology, but I do know we were a first move on style of event and how we did events and how we leveraged it on social media, and we really took advantage of marketing promotion via social media. So that was definitely a factor.
Let me ask you a question on that, though.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So leveraging social media, it was still a business grounded in the events, which is the colloquial button seats. So it sounds like
Yep.
sort of phase one, the leveraging of social media was a new way, a more cost effective way to get the message out, to sell the tickets, to get the people there, as opposed to today, where usually an event today, unless your name is Tony Robbins, is the last place you'd start, right? So you're
Right.
figuring out how to. So can you talk about that in terms of the
Yeah.
modality and getting content out there digitally?
Well, so we were in the event space. We were an aggregator, right? So we were aggregating, and we chose to double down on experiential events, where a lot of people were cutting back. We actually
Okay.
poured more in, and what we did is we built this reputation for it as an unbelievable blast. Well, we also started with the under 40 market. So our average age avatar was 27 years old. 28 years old. So there was a lot of like community, authenticity, a lot of the desire to be in. So that's where we put a lot of our energy. So then technology was a natural play with that group
Sure.
because so social media and using that for ticket sales and everything else was that was that. Then we started taking content online. Then we started leveraging, that in time, but we made it as a natural based on our avatar, based on our target market, and they really pushed us that direction.
Yep.
At the same time, we were also building the simulcast routine, and we've been doing simulcasting for a number of years. But we took LeaderCast to a whole nother level. We partnered with Chick-fil-A. They were a title sponsor. And we basically had, we got to 185,000 people, 780 locations on a one-day event. And that was all broadcast via technology. That was all simulcast. So everything there, we had a live audience just for rah-rah and about 7,000 to 8,000 people. But the real money was made in expanding that, to the host sites.
Sure.
And the host sites for the drivers. And so, and the idea was, you can't bring Tony Blair, Coach Krzyzewski to your city. So why don't you bring him through technology? And, so chambers of commerce or coaches, consultants, what have you, would use it.
Great. And a much more cost-effective, obvious way to bring it in, unless you happen to have $300,000-$400,000 sitting around to ask Tony Blair to come, right?
Well, that was the issue, right? So the
Right.
cost of these speakers kept going up and up. And also people were looking, going, a whole day event sitting and watching TV, that's hard.
So let's talk about that because, the old model, I think there's lots of variables moving on here in terms of how, you mentioned the 27-year-olds, but in the ancient days of 2002, a 45-year-old executive, business leader, aspiring entrepreneur, whatever, would go to an event for a day, right? I mean, that wasn't all that
Right.
unusual. And
Right.
it was a fast moving day. There were multiple people to see. There was community. There was, content, whatever. You almost can't give that away today, with the exception of maybe TED or a handful. You count them on one hand. But how do you deal with the issue of give it to me in short form? Like how do you give me something that would have taken a 90-minute experience for one speaker in little bite-sized nuggets, to that 27-year-old today?
I think TED actually changed a lot of this, the TED Talks and that formatting. So yesterday, for instance, we just launched. I produced a summit, a 100x Leader Summit,
Yep.
and we produced this in January. We pre-broadcast. So I've just eliminated all simulcasting needs. We created a 2.5 hour experience and some bolt-ons so that any coach, any consultant, anyone who wants to use our platform, they can use it. All they have to do, it's free, 2.5 hour experience if you buy books. So that's part of our book launch strategy. So, and I did research yesterday afterwards. We had about 15 or 18 locations yesterday. There's another batch doing it today. And their feedback was spot on, great, maybe 30 minutes too long. And I'm like, okay, so we're at 2 hours now is so to go, if 2 hours is the max, just hold people's attention and so on and so forth. So I think what it is, Peter, is it's basically it's the transition from 20th century learning to 21st century learning. There's
Yep.
been so much into our world. When you think of Netflix and what Netflix has done, think of TED. So the entertainment factor and binge watching factor, people are kind of used to it, hour slots, and so you get into this just the issue of globally dispersed world, and how do you lead in a digitally connected way? I think that's what people are figuring out, and we're spending most of our time in that space, going from
Yeah.
20th century to 21st century, trying to figure that out.
So let's talk about that through the lens of because now you're when you've been there for a while, but through the lens of the author, through the lens of the thought leader, through the lens of the speaker. If that's the world I'm living in, this binge watching on demand, TED Talk, Netflix, whatever, even a book, that is depending on your reading speed and the length of the book, I don't know, a 5 to 8 hour commitment. That's a commitment.
Yes.
And I remember when TED first started, not when it first started, but when it first started really sort of hitting the pop culture side 10, 15 years ago, the immediate reaction amongst sort of my peer groups, I'm ancient, right? I'm 51, was ha ha ha, 18 minutes. How could you possibly condense all that thinking in a book that's 250 pages to 18 minutes? And now it's the same statement, but they're saying, oh my God, do we really need all 18 minutes? Can we get that down to 11? So
Right.
what do you do with that
Well,
as an author and a thought leader? Because you can't publish a book that's 7 pages.
Well, okay, so let's first talk about publishing, and the let's talk about the racket of publishing.
May it rest in
Uh,
peace, right?
meaning that a book, the publishers are pushing for on the back. They're pushing for the $20 to $25 book. They want
Yep.
it hardcover.
Yep.
So what they need is they need fill and good content, but they're not really worried about the content. They're really focused on your platform.
Of course.
$25 is 50,000, 55,000
Yep.
words.
Yep.
So everyone knows in a 55,000 word book, unless you have a lot to say, then you could have said some of that in 22,000 words, or you could have said that in 18,000 words, meaning that there's
Well, and how
always
many
a hook.
books? I think the check today is I'm an avid reader, and I
Yep.
would say 30 to 50% of the books I read, one of the comments to myself is, yeah, that probably could have been a TED talk or a blog, and that would have been
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right. Like when I was in fourth grade, you had to write a book report, and there were a lot of very, very, very's in there. It's the
Absolutely.
equivalent of that, right?
Well, you think the hook of a book is usually in the third or fourth chapter.
Yeah,
So
right, right.
if you and so then everything from there is either setting it up or explaining afterwards. Now, I'm saying that as I just launched the book, I have feel pretty strongly that I filled the book from brim to brim with great content. Now, but I know what the norm is in dealing with publishers. So that said, a lot could be said in a shorter period of time, but the publishers make them go longer. So back to TED Talks and back to 21st century learning. 21st century learning. Here's the landscape. People don't read. People have attention deficit issues themselves. They're cynical and they're know-it-alls. So you put that all into the framework of we are a 365, 24/7 digital world. So we've had so much information transfer that information transfer has less and less and less meaning. So you have to hook
Well,
and
and wait,
find.
actually, one other thing. The other thing you didn't touch on in a book, and I think it's a critical piece, it's also this instant relevance, right? So if you write a book today, it's 18 months till it hits the street. If I were to ask you off the top of your head, what was on top of your mind 18 months ago, you have no idea.
Right, right.
And I think there's a window of this instant connection that you lose in a book. A book, is by the very nature of the way you produce it, dated before it's alive.
Yeah, that's right. But you and I know books are marketing.
Sure.
That's really what it is. Unless you have the people out there that said this is for my legacy,
Yeah, of course.
books are meant for marketing, and that's getting something out there. And so for us, we did two things. We created the book, The 100X Leader, but we also then produced Giant TV.
Okay.
Giant TV launched with the book. So at the back end of the book, we said, okay, if you love this, now go immediately to Giant TV. And on there's assessments, there's surveys, there's ebooks, there's podcasts, and it's $8.99 a month, and it's a Netflix for leadership. And so we basically
I love
built
it.
binge-worthy edutainment series is what we're after. Right now, we have a lot of static because we're basically trying to communicate our base level. And we have about 550 episodes that are 6 to 8 minutes in length on Giant TV. And then we also made it where it's an affiliate program. Anyone can sell it and get 20%. So now 20% of $8.99 is not very much, but it adds up over time.
Sure.
So that's how we're addressing this very issue. To go, okay, the next era, the next season is people are used to Netflix. They're
And
used
is that
to.
so? Let me ask you this: is that model thinking? It sounds more like a B2C model, but talk to me about the difference of selling content in a B2C, meaning direct to an end user, versus a B2B or a B2SMB.
Well, our approach is actually to make it feel like a B2C, but drop it into the B2B market because we're basically, let's just say we go to you, Peter, and you've got 50 employees.
Mm-hmm.
You sign everyone up $8.99 a month. Obviously there's enterprise pricing and all
Right,
that
right,
kind of
right,
stuff.
right, right, right.
But you get in, and in it, if you sign up anyone underneath you, then you have the data component, and then you can it tracks everyone's movement. Then you get a report, and you can see exactly.
So I just want
So
to add. So it's more at the not at the full scale enterprise where Google might buy a 7-figure license, but I'm a leader, I'm a manager, and I have discretion for the 20, 50, whatever people on my team where it's point and click, right? I get influenced by something that I see or read. I want to roll that out within the parameters of the span of control that I have. and I can click a button and just buy it and subscribe my team to it. Is that what you're
That's
saying?
right. You
Okay.
can,
Okay.
and on it, you can also create pathways. So
Good.
we have pathways on there. So if you go, hey, I've got a new employees and I want them to take the 5 voices assessment, to listen to this, to watch this, to do this exercise, then you can actually create it yourself.
Yep.
So what we're doing is we're basically using the best of technology and the best of Netflix with a TED type format in episode length, then putting basically the best of the 20th century learning platforms, and putting it into a platform with apps. But we're calling it Giant TV. So it's this mix
I
of
love it. Yeah.
education with entertainment, and entertainment feel, but with it's not click and snore, and that's what we talk about with
Right.
most
Right.
of the stuff in the past.
Well,
So that's
you mentioned assessment. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but so much good stuff coming. Assessments are critical today, right? Because the training and development leader on the corporate side of 10 or 15 years ago was trying to do the best they can with what they had, right? We know we need to develop leaders, and we know we need to develop managers, and we know this is good stuff, and we vetted it or whatever. But this whole assessment, measurement, ROI conversation is exactly what happened to the marketing folks 15, 20, 25 years ago. First, they resisted, and there isn't a marketer out there that can't tell you their ROI if they're going to have a job in another week or so. So,
right.
talk to me a little bit about the importance of assessments, because if I'm making an investment of either my time, my energy, money, whatever, into some learning, I want to know that if it purports to tell me I'm going to be a better negotiator, how do you measure that? Like, what does that look like? So tell me how you bake sort of assessments into the mix.
Well, yeah. So what we do is we put them all together with learning, because the problem is, you can have online quizzes, and a quiz is meant to drive email traffic. And hey, take this quiz on Harry Potter. What kind of a blah 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 are you, or
Right,
whatever.
that's
All
marketing,
they're
not
doing.
not learning.
That's
Right, right.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
marketing.
totally.
Then you get into the assessment world, and the assessment's like, okay, so we have a 5 voices assessment. 5voices.com, a free assessment if you want to learn about your personality. We took what Jungian type was, which were Myers-Briggs, and we
Yep.
simplified it down to 5 voices. Much, much easier to remember and scale. So when people take it, then all of a sudden that goes directly. Then we can capture who they believe they are.
Okay.
But from there, which is helpful, but we immediately then apply and created 15 videos off of those people. So for instance, I'm a connector creative pioneer.
Okay.
Well, once I know I'm a connector creative pioneer, then the videos automatically link, and now I'm transitioning them into a learning experience automatically. So I would then have access to the 15 videos, like how does a connector creative pioneer react under stress? How does a connector creative pioneer deal with conflict? So all of the things that are real life, I can have access now to video tied to that thing automatically. And I think that's what happens in a lot of assessments. There's not learning attached to it in an applied learning in an immediacy. And that's what we're trying to shore up,
Well, and the market
because
is
we're
getting
driving people.
smarter,
Okay.
right? So I think part of it is the market's demanding that now, right? In many ways.
That's right.
Show me it worked, right? If you were in the business of selling, weight loss and people got larger on your program, that's not going to
You're
be good
right.
for you. And I think assessments are the same piece.
But it's, Peter, what it is, Peter, is that it's integration is what I'm
Yes.
trying to say. It's the point, though, that integration, it has to be integrated in several ways. It has to be personality, has to be connected to emotional intelligence and to IQ. What normally happens in the training world is that someone specializes on personality, or someone specializes on emotional intelligence, or IQ only. So like, yeah, Harvard, that's really good, but like, how does that play into my personality type? Or how does that play into this emotional intelligence piece? Or DISC, I love what you're doing here, but where does it fit in? So my point is that integration is so key, because people, like, they'll find it, but if they have to work too hard, they'll just give up and they'll move on,
Right,
or they'll
because
wait.
we live in this point and click world, right? I'm not going to search too
That's
hard,
right.
and I expect anybody I'm buying anything from to make my life easier. Thank you, Amazon. Right? Like
That's right.
I don't want to work too hard for it. It just does. It's not going to work for me. Cool. All right, as we
Yep.
start to wrap up here, this has been awesome, and I want to listen to this again because there's so much great information here. What would you advise to someone that's first sort of coming onto the scene? So maybe they're a little bit younger, or maybe they've had an esteemed career in the corporate world or academia, they want to dive into this. The old rules don't work of publish a book 18 months, like all that. What are, if you will, either the new rules or the new guidelines or the new things to consider in order to make it work as a thought?
So, managing expectations is the biggest part. I find, I know for me, it depends if you're a feeler or a thinker, but having these expectations, I'll run into people all the time. Yeah, I'm thinking about writing a book. And I'm in my mind like, oh gosh, really? Okay.
Does
Well,
the world need another
why?
book, right?
Does the world need it? And to that person, they're thinking, if I only had a book, then, and I'm like, yeah, I've been, my book's sitting right now next to some amazing books in Barnes and Noble and other places. Okay, big deal. That's good. I mean, but I've been through enough book launches to go, that's not the end all be all. And I've had a number of years of being disappointed because of like, is that all there is? Well, books don't make a lot of money unless you're Michelle Obama or certain people. And so having to manage expectations on what your platform is. The second, understanding why, then it's understanding what's your business model going to be and getting realistic with it.
And by the way, the business model, let me be clear, is not being an author is not a business model. Again, unless you're named Obama.
No, absolutely. So the thing that people always tell us, I get this feedback all the time. Why you guys, you believe this, don't you? You live this. So there is something with passion that will carry you a lot further than if it's a shtick. And all the shtick people can smell that out, and that burns up pretty quickly, and their influence wanes. So living it is a big part. I believe this stuff. This isn't. This is real, and I think that's undershared.
Well, if you think of the some of the legends in this business, right? So the Maxwells and the Lencioni and all those folks, I think you're 1,000% right. This isn't some manufactured something. This is who they are. This is what they believe. This is how they not only live their lives but run their businesses, etc.
Yeah, and I've spent a lot of time with John Maxwell, and he is exactly what you think he is. And you may not like him, or you may love him, but he's integral. He is exactly who you think he is. Totally the same with Pat Lencioni. Pat's a dear friend, and he is an unbelievable person. Henry Cloud, same way. So some of these guys, they actually, they're living it out. I'll never forget, I spent 2 days with Henry Cloud in his world, and this guy is serving people all day long. So his content is coming out of that serving. That's how we are as well. And so so you have to be able to do that. If you're kind of showing up because you have a shtick of some Who Moved My Cheese or something and that's not bad. It was a great book. Obviously, but those kinds of little shticks, but it's not really who you are, what you're about, then you're not going to make it very long.
Great advice there. Well, I appreciate all that you've shared with us, and I think 100X is going to kill it. And I encourage everybody to check that out. And per Jeremie, there is no fluff. That's a pretty high bar today. Looking forward to reading my copy of it. But thank you so much for joining, and I appreciate all that you shared with us today.
You got it. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.